Thank you again, Michael. And now we welcome the next one, Neale Rooney from Maynooth University. Neale is working on the project led by Suzanne Letters 1916. He's a research assistant at Maynooth University. Thank you to be here, Neale.
Okay. Sounds good. Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Neale, and I'm going to be here to chat to you briefly about 1916 in transition, the creation of a series of lesson plans for use in secondary school classrooms across Ireland. Now, before I begin, I want to make a quick mention to my brave colleagues working at home through the wind and the rain and not here enjoying this beautiful Swiss weather. I'm sure they don't mind. Before going into the creation of the lesson plans themselves, I want to give a quick bit of context as to what is the Letters of 1916 and why we're fixated on the year 1916 as well. Well, the Letters of 1916 is Ireland's first public digital humanities project. It is creating a crowdsourced collection of letters written between October 1915 and November 1916. At the time of speaking, we have over 3,000 primary source documents written in this time. You might be wondering, why 1916? Well, this was a very important year for Ireland. It found itself culturally at a crossroads where it was torn between its involvement in the Great War and also the rise of militant nationalism, which culminated in the Easter 1916 rebellion against British rule in Ireland. The Easter Rising is seen as sort of the beginning of the Irish struggle for independence. And 2016, last year, saw the centenary celebration of this event. So the Letters of 1916 collects correspondence. Any document is included as long as it falls within our date range and concerns Ireland in some capacity. The correspondence that we receive comes from both public institutions from Ireland and abroad, such as the New York Public Library or the National Archives of Ireland, and also from over 40 private and family collections. Regarding education in Letters 1916, we've always maintained an interest in it. As a public digital humanities project, we also maintain a great degree of outreach. We're based in Maynooth, which is that little red dot there, and each of these white dots, as you can see, are community visits that we have done, places that we visited in various counties across Ireland. And as part of these visits, we interact with and engage with secondary schools, where we teach some basic TI encoding, metadata, and introduce students to this project and similar resources online. However, the focus of this talk today is going to be about one of these teachers' workshops that we carried out. One was in 2014. The one I'm going to talk about today was in 2015, and that was called 1916 in Transition. So 1916 in Transition was a collaboration between the Irish Department of Education, the Research Council, and the Military Archives. And its goal was to create a series of lesson plans that could be used in secondary schools across Ireland during the centenary year. Predominantly, we wanted to work with transition year classrooms. Now, you might be wondering, what is transition year? The Irish secondary level system is divided into a junior cycle and a senior cycle. Both cycles culminate in a state exam, the junior cert and leaving cert, respectively. Transition year falls in between these. It's offered in the majority of schools across Ireland as an optional 1 year for students to sort of take time out from the exam stress and from working towards a state exam and to experiment and experience different courses to sort of plant their feet before they make the next move to senior cycle. Now, the flexibility of transition year informed our main objectives that we wanted to work with. We wanted to familiarize students with the online sources available for them. We wanted to deliver an understanding of some of the more complex and nuanced concepts of the revolutionary period, such as what it meant to be loyal to, say, Ireland and Britain, and the ideas of nationalism. We also wanted to enable students, particularly history students, to work with primary source documents. The junior and senior syllabuses of history in Ireland are predominantly, they predominantly work with a secondary source textbook. There is a bit of research done on primary sources, but it's not the main focus. And to sort of compound that as well, we wanted to further their analytical and comprehensive skills. It's also worth noting that classes in TY, because they fall outside of the stricter years, they're far less rigid, and teachers are far more flexible in how they go about planning and creating them. So this leads us on to the workshop itself, which, as I mentioned, was held in the summer of 2015. For those of you who were at the workshop yesterday, you might remember the sticky pad exercise that we engaged in. So The workshop was very much a participatory and team-based approach, what we went for. We had numerous teachers. We had over 15 teachers, as well as members of archives, third-level learning institutions, the Letters of 1916, and the military archives. And participants were introduced to several different themes, which we had asked them to vote on via doodle poll in the months beforehand. And these were what we would develop the lesson plans from. So some of these themes were concepts such as what it meant with divided loyalty, or what would it have been like to be a civilian at this time caught up in this sort of event. And over the course of 3 days, teachers worked in 4 groups to brainstorm and come up with an idea of how we could adapt these to work in a classroom. And by the end of the 3 days, we had a set of 11 sort of concrete ideas which would go on to form the lesson plans that we would use. Each of these proposed lesson plans made use of primary sources from both the Letters of 1916 and the military archive collections. After the workshop, when it came to the task of building these, the Letters 1916 team, we finalized the lesson plans to be one sort of set format. We wireframed them, and then our collaborators developed them. And the lesson plans were developed with several key criteria in mind. First of all, we wanted to make sure teachers could search via a toolkit. Not every school in Ireland has access to smart classrooms, so it made sense that teachers could see by what materials they had and choose subjects that way. Secondly, to choose via subject. Thirdly, we wanted to make sure that every subject was available to be downloaded as a PDF, or not every subject, sorry, every lesson plan. And fourth of all, we wanted to make sure that every single resource that was necessary for it was provided online. All these considerations were brought up with conversation with the teachers during the development in the workshop. As I mentioned, 11 lesson plans are available online, and they encourage different levels of activities with students, from textual analysis to presentations, role play, group work, and design. They were successfully launched on the 3rd of October 2015. Quite happy to see that we trended on Twitter ahead of FIFA, which was nice. And they received quite a positive response, which was good. And we could see the teachers seemed to be excited to work with them. Now, before we take a look at 2 case studies, which I want to get into, I just want to remind people about Transition Year's goals. Transition Year is predicated upon the development of its students. And I believe that the next 2 examples really exemplify this. The first school where they were tested was St. Angela's College, Cork. Students here worked with the concept of loyalty, or divided loyalty. How could one be loyal to more than one ideal? And under their teacher, Helene O'Keefe, they decided to not use the resources that we'd set aside, but rather choose another set of resources from the Letters 1916 collection. The letters of an Irish soldier from Cork. So the teacher deliberately picked something that would resonate with her students. She realized there were place names that hadn't changed in 100 years, and these did resonate indeed with the students. And there was a nice visual component added to it, an assessment that wasn't what we had initially intended when we devised the lesson plan. And this was that the students created 2 cardboard houses to house Peter Mooney's letters, this Irish soldier. One was draped in British flag, the other was draped in an Irish flag, to symbolize that his letters can belong to both ideas, that somebody can be a part of 2 separate identities. And the work done by Helene's students was reported in the Irish press in 2016, which was a nice bit of press for them. The second school was Drimnagh Castle CBS in Dublin, and this too sort of went with the visual approach. And their teacher, Dominic Price, who had been a participant in the workshop, he, rather than focus on one lesson plan, amalgamated quite a number together to focus on a broader theme, broader concepts. And his students, they created these series of art installations, such as these bronze figurines that you can see here, which were inspired by famous Irish painting about the Rising, and also these sorts of art prints and posters, which reflect the not the correspondence, but the primary sources of the Letters 1916 and the military archives. The work done by the students was actually featured in a special exhibition in Dublin, and the school had a nice launch of the material as well. To sort of quantify takeaways, I think it's quite difficult to say accurately qualify the impact of the lesson plans. For example, these figures here tell you, well, based off clicks, what was the most popular lesson plan, or what were the number of visits to the site. But I believe to get a true indication of how these worked and the impact of them, what worked and what didn't, we need to turn to the people who actually used them, such as the teachers, Helene and Dominic. Dominic mentions that enabling access to material was one of the most important things, that they had just been using textbooks. This was something new, working with primary sources, bringing the history to the students. Saying that Helene mentions that students are now able to make up their own minds about what happened. They're not relying on the textbook to tell them what did happen. They're forming their own opinions. The students, too, sort of reflect this. That Alice McCarthy from Cork mentions that in junior cert history, you learn mainly about dates. You don't get the bigger picture of what really happened, that these were real events that real people were caught up in. Whereas Brian Conway in Drimnagh Castle, he says that he got to make up his own thoughts about 1916. He got to analyze the letters written by one of the revolutionaries at the time and see the love and the humane side to an event that was a series of dates to him. In the months after the release, this is just some indication of how the project was reported afterwards and some of the ways that it was mentioned online between teachers' blogs and also the state centenary report. We learned several important takeaways from the project. First and foremost, the importance of flexibility. The two examples that I've given you didn't follow the lesson plan to the letter. Rather, they experimented and they saw an opportunity to make something better, something more important that their students would tangibly interact with. And I think that flexibility should be encouraged. Secondly is technology and access. Not every school in Ireland, as I mentioned, has access to smart classrooms. All the digital materials required for the workshop are required for these lessons. We made available to download so that people could get them into classroom if they needed them. And the third one is use beyond transition year. Dominic and his students with the art installation in Dublin, they actually managed to accomplish that as part of their final year project in sixth year, something we hadn't anticipated. They were able to use the material for outside the scope that we initially intended. And I believe that this shows that there is potential for a project such as this, or these materials, to fit into the broader syllabi. So to conclude, we set out with 4 objectives, and I hope that the 2 examples that I've just briefly shown you here show that we went some way to accomplishing what we set out to do. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, dear Neale. So maybe one question? If not, maybe I have one, okay. If I can allow me. So yes, I am since a long time very fascinated by the project, and your presentation was very lively. So do you think that we could, at a certain point, switch from fields for teaching at the university to teaching by projects in a decisive switch? I mean, I think to Yves Citon, a French linguist and philosopher, who proposed to have a bachelor generalist and then specialization. So could we imagine, I don't know, to have such a generalist bachelor and then to be a trained for master from such a project, for example? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. I think that from our experience in working, at least with secondary schools, very much it is held in place by the strict syllabus of a primary, or not primary, but a junior and senior cycle, that they all coalesce towards one major examination or one major method of, or one major examination, like I said. So students are aware that they're working towards one outcome. If there were more outcomes or more ways of accomplishing the task, I believe that perhaps, yes.